Hello and welcome to the channel. For today's tutorial, I'll be sharing with you how I made this waist snatched blouse with a hip and butt padding skirt and also a deep sweetheart neckline and a balloon sleeve. For today's tutorial, I'll be focusing more on the blouse part of this dress. So if you haven't yet seen the cutting of this particular pattern, please go down to my previous video, or I'm going to leave a link at my description box. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe, like, share, and also turn on notification to get new updates from my channel. So let's start. So here are my pattern. I have gone ahead to add half-inch round for joining allowance. So for the yoke part, I'll be adding half-inch. I added half-inch, sorry, and I added half-inch round on this part. I cut out the fabric, the gum stay, and the lining for this piece. And over to this side, I added half-inch round, but I didn't add by the side because I've already added sewing allowance to it, and I cut out gum stay and lining for it too. So going over to my back also, I did the same thing. For my yoke, I added half-inch this side, and I didn't add at this part because I've added half while drafting the pattern. So for my modesty panel, I went ahead to add few extra inches to it to make sure it's going to cover my back properly. And I also added half-inch round. I cut out gum stay and also fabric for the lining for the back. So if you join your back this way, this is what you're going to have. So I'm just going to notch that part where I'll be joining the yoke to the back part of the dress, so that I won't get confused where I'm going to be joining it. So next part is where I'll be cutting my wadding. So I'm using a light wadding because I don't really like much padding on my dress. You can go ahead and use your breast cup or your thick wadding if you like to. So I'll go ahead and place my pattern on the wadding this way, and I folded it into two, and I made sure it started from my under bust. So at my bust, I'm going to place my tape and mark my bust pan, and I'm just going to add extra 1 inch by the side because the breast is fuller by the side. Then I'll connect it down to my under bust, and I will go upwards and connect it to the upper part of my pattern this way. So after connecting for this side, I'm just going to go over to the other side. So you can just start on top, or you can decide to bring it lower, just the same way I did at the upper part of this pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure when I join it, it is going to meet. So I'm just going to place it this way and check. So what I have is okay. So this is what I'm going to be cutting for the wadding of the dress. Next step I'm going to take is to open up my pattern for joining. So next thing I'm going to do is to open up my pattern this way, and I'm going to place it how I'm going to join it. So this is the back part of my pattern. So this is how I'm going to join it first. I'm going to go over to the machine, and I'm going to join it with half-inch this way. So because I'm using a wadding, what I'm going to do, I'll place my wadding on the pattern first, and I'm going to iron before actually going to join it. So when joining my wadding, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure the shiny part of my wadding is facing the wrong side of my fabric this way. So I'm going to bring over the gum stay and the lining, and I'm going to be placing it how I'm going to be joining the pattern. So the same way I'm going to join my fabric is the same way I'm going to be joining my lining parts. So after joining my fabric and my lining, this is what I have. This is what is looking like. So the next step is to join the yoke to the dress. To join the yoke to the dress, I'm going to unpin my pattern and I'm going to place it down. So I cut out 2 pieces for the yoke part of my neck. I'm doubling my net area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the machine and I'm going to stitch down the neckline. After stitching it down, I'll just trim it out a bit. So I've gone ahead to turn the neckline and this is what I have. So I'll be joining it to my pattern. So first of all, I mark where the yoke is going to stop at my pattern. So next I'll be joining it how my yoke is going to be. So I'm just going to place the front part, the back part of my dress, and I'm going to place the lining on it this way. As you can see, the back part is facing the back part of the lining. So this is what you're going to do. So after that, you're just going to flip it open and make sure you mark out that line very well where your yoke is going to stop, and you're going to pin your yoke starting from that line. So you're just going to sew with 1/2 inch, connecting it from the beginning to the end of the armhole side of your dress. But first you're just going to pin it down. Then I'm going to take my lining part and I'm going to also place it from where the yoke started also, and I'm going to pin it to the dress. After pinning my lining part to where the yoke is going to stop, so this is what I have. So I'm just going to go over to the sewing machine and I will sew it down. And after sewing this, I'm also going to sew the other one. So I'm just going to stop where that yoke stops, and I'm not going to join the middle yet. So after joining one side of the yoke, this is what it is looking like. So I'll go ahead and I will also join the other part just like I did for this side. So just the same way I did for the other side, I marked where my yoke started and I'm going to pin it round. After pinning it round, I'm going to place the lining and also place it where the yoke stopped, and I'm going to sew it, but I'm not going to join the middle yet. So after joining it, this is what I have. The next step is to join the remaining parts of the dress. So after pinning it down, this is what I have, and I'll go ahead and I'm going to join it. I'm going to sew with 1/2 inch. So next I'll be picking up the lining part. So at the lining part, I'm just going to place it this way, and I'm going to also join with 1/2 inch starting from the yoke area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the fabric part. So I'll be joining fabric to fabric and I will be joining the lining to lining. So I'm just going to pin it down from the beginning part of my fabric. After where the yoke stopped, I'm going to pin it down from the beginning part to the ending. After pinning down, I'm just going to sew. So after joining up the front part of my dress, this is what I have. So this is actually the easiest way to join a deep neckline yoke. So next thing I'm going to do is to notch it. After notching it, I'll go ahead to turn it to the wrong side. I'm going to pin it down this way and I'm going to stitch on it. and I'm going to stitch on the lower part, and I will be turning it open from the armhole area. So I've gone ahead to stitch it round, and I left the armhole area open, and I will be turning it from that part. So I'm done sewing, and I have flipped it to the right side. I turned it from the armhole area, and this is what my dress is looking like. Next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and join the back part of this dress. So for the back part of my dress, I sewed this for the loop at the back, and I'm going to work on my yoke first. So if you notice, the yoke for the back is just my material. I'm just going to flip it open, and I'm going to turn it with my lining. So I'm going to place my lining on it, the lining facing the right side, so that when I sew, it's going to be on the wrong side. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to stitch on it. But before stitching on it, I'm going to use that pieces I cut out to create a loop at the back of the dress. So I'm going to sew the neckline and sew this part, then leave this part open because I'm going to attach sleeve on it. So I'm done stitching it down, and I've gone ahead to notch. Then I'll just open it up and place to show you what I have sewed. So this is my back yoke, and this is what it's looking like. So whatever I do to this part, I'm just going to also open the other part of my yoke. So the back part of my yoke is ready, and this is what I have. So next thing is I'm just going to join my neckline down to the front part of the dress. So to join it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the front neckline, and I'm going to be placing it on the back neckline. So after placing it, I'll open up the back neckline this way and wrap it around the front neckline, and I will sew with 1/2 inch. So this is what it will be looking like when I flip it open. After I'm done joining my neckline, I'll be sewing my modesty panel. So to do that, I'm going to iron my gum stay on the main fabric, and I'm going to stitch round it. So I added few extra inches just to make sure the modesty panel will cover my back properly. So going over to the back side of the dress, I'm going to unpin my pattern, and I will also iron gum stay to the lining part of my dress, and I'm going to use it to turn the main fabric. So to join the back, remember I notched the main fabric at the back to indicate where I'm going to join my yoke. So I'm just going to place that part on the yoke part, and I'll go ahead to pin it down. After pinning it, I'm going to flip it open so that I can join the lining part to the main fabric. So I'm going to place the lining part on it this way, and I'm going to stitch with 1/2 inch at this part. Then I'm going to flip my main fabric inside it this way, and I'm going to stitch down by the sides. I'm going to sew, and then I'll leave about few inches on top where I'll be turning it open from that side, and later I'll be top stitching it. So before I top stitch on it, I'm actually going to add boning to the dress because I'm going to be inserting eyelets on it. So on the main fabric part, I'm just going to measure about 1/2 inches that I'm going to be using to turn the fabric, and then after that I'll be sewing a reddening boning to it. After sewing my reddening boning or my sewable boning, I'm going to be passing my plastic boning underneath it just to give structure to the lacing bar side to avoid it from folding when I'm going to lace the back. So after that, I'll go back and stitch round the dress. After sewing the sides, I'm just going to flip it open to show you what I have. So after sewing, this is what I have, and I'm going to top stitch the side of the dress. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is to also sew for the other back side of the dress. So I'm done sewing, and this is what I have for the back and front part of the blouse. So after sewing, the next thing is to mark about 0.75 inches or 1 inch. So the reason why you're doing this is that you're going to create a space for your eyelet before inserting your modesty panel. So I'm just going to draw and connect the line. So this will indicate where I'll attach my modesty panel from, or where I'll attach it to. So this is my modesty panel. If you notice, it's a lot bigger than what I cut out. So I added extra inches to it so that it's going to cover my back properly. So the next thing I'm going to be doing right now is to attach the modesty panel to the dress. So to attach the modesty panel to the dress, I'm just going to open my dress this way, place it on that mark that I made, and make sure that it's sitting properly on it, and I'll go ahead and I will sew on that line. So after I'm done sewing, this is what I have. As you can see, I've attached it, and I'll go ahead to insert eyelet at that back. Next is to cut out my sleeve for the blouse. So I've cut out the fabric for my sleeve, and what I have here is about 15 by 18 inches, and I cut it on fold. So for the width of the sleeve, 15 inches on fold is not a constant, depending on how full you want it to be. So for the length, what you're going to do is to measure your shoulder to elbow, and then you're going to add the amount of flay you want to, and then add your folding allowance at the ending part. So next, I'm just going to mark my sleeve cap, and I'm just going to do a freehand sketch for the sleeve because I'm still going to gather it or pleat it at the shoulder line. Next, I'll place my tape and mark my shoulder to elbow line, and I'm going to draw a straight line. On that line, I'll be sewing a gather stitch, and then at the lower part, I'm just going to fold it with 1/2 inch. Then I'll cut out this part of my sleeve. So I'm done sewing the gather stitch at this part, and I've also folded the lower part of my sleeve. So this part of my net, I cut out my elbow circumference and I added 1/2 inch, and I cut out the length of my sleeve. So next, I'll be attaching it with 1/2 inch on the gathered part of my sleeve, and I'll be doing this on the wrong side of my sleeve. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to stitch it down. After stitching it down, I'm going to tuck in the bridal satin part of my sleeve this way, and I'm going to sew with 1/2 inch on the net because I added 1/2 inch allowance. So I'm just going to sew separately on the net this way to the end of the sleeve. Then on the main fabric, I'll also be joining it with 1/2 inch and also 1/2 at the lower part, and I'll be doing that separately. So after joining it, this is what I have. I've flipped it to the right side. So this is what my sleeve is looking like. The next step is to attach the sleeve to the dress. So I stitched to the end. What I'm just going to do is to open it up a little by the sides. So after doing that, the next thing you're going to do is to pin it round your armhole, or you're going to sew a gather stitch and stitch it round your armhole. Sorry, the armhole of the dress that you're making. So remember, while drafting the pattern, we added 1.5 inches. After turning it with 1/2 inch, you're going to be left with 1 inch. So what you're going to do is to go ahead and mark the 1 inch right down, or you can go ahead and mark your shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, and shoulder to waistline, and insert your cheek your measurement and insert it. But while you're sewing at your waist side, make sure you recheck your waist because we snatched our waist, and make sure you insert your new waistline measurement. So I'll go ahead and sew. So after I'm done sewing, this is what I have, and I'm going to insert my eyelet at the back, and this is what the inside part of my dress is looking like. Like you can see, is very neat, and I'm going to insert a button for my loop at my loop area. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Join me in my next class where I'll be sewing the hip padding parts of this dress. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also turn on the notification button to get new updates from my channel whenever I post.